Welcome to our first Spirit Week lesson. Each day this week, we will spend a little time looking at some of the stories in the Bible that take place on the road. So today we get to eavesdrop on Jesus and his disciples while they walk and talk together. Can you imagine walking with Jesus? We have lots of stories of Jesus doing miracles in our Bible. We have lots of Jesus parables and lessons in our Gospels. But I wonder what it would be like to walk down the road with Jesus. Would you talk about the weather or the scenery or maybe the latest news from Rome or Jerusalem? Maybe you'd keep it more local and just talk about the latest miracle or lesson. In Mark 9, we get a glimpse into a conversation that happens on the road. Actually, we get glimpses into two conversations. So this is Mark 9, 30 through 37. They left that place and passed through Galilee. Jesus did not want anyone to know where they were, because he was teaching his disciples. He said to them, "The Son of Man is going to be betrayed into the hands of men. They will kill him, and after 3 days he will rise." But they did not understand what he meant and were afraid to ask him about it. They came to Capernaum, where he was in the house. He asked them, "What are you arguing about on the road?" But they kept quiet, because on the way they had argued about who was the greatest. Sitting down, Jesus called the 12 and said, "If anyone wants to be first, he must be the very last and the servant of all." He took a little child and had him stand among them. Taking him in his arms, he said to them, "Whoever welcomes one of these little children in my name welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me does not welcome me, but the one who sent me." Jesus was using the time on the road to teach his disciples about what was coming. He'll be betrayed, killed, and raised again. Maybe the disciples, maybe they were too tired from walking to really understand what Jesus was saying. Or maybe they just kept reliving Jesus' last miracle of casting a boy's demons out, or the transfiguration. Both had just happened. I don't know why they had such a hard time understanding what Jesus was telling them. And I don't know why they were too afraid to ask. That last part, it seems really weird to me. I mean, the disciples were afraid to ask Jesus. It sounds strange until I put myself in their shoes. Admitting that you don't understand something can be hard and scary. No one likes to admit that they weren't fully listening or paying attention the first time something is said. And it can be even harder to admit that you can't wrap your mind around something. It can make you feel dumb. I've been right where the disciples were. Not understanding and too worried about what others thought about me to admit that I needed a little extra help understanding. But that's just one of the conversations that happened that day on the road. Once they have stopped, we find out that Jesus has been listening to them on the road. He knew that they were arguing, so he asked them for some details. And they don't come clean. They remain silent because the truth wasn't very flattering. You see, they'd been arguing about who was the greatest. They'd been afraid to admit that they didn't understand what Jesus was saying. Afraid that they would look bad, all while debating which of them was the greatest. Isn't that ironic? The issue the disciples seem to be having on this walk down the road is their egos. They cared so much about being important that they missed the most important announcement that got to the heart of who Jesus was and why Jesus was there. They missed the good news of a Savior because they were too afraid to ask. They were too consumed with themselves. Maybe I've walked in the disciples' shoes a little more than I'd like to admit. It can be easy to inflate our own egos, to think of ourselves as more important than we are. We all want to be the greatest at some point. Jesus had a lesson that those disciples had to hear. It's a lesson that we all need to hear. Without telling them, He knew about their debate of who would be the greatest. And he teaches them a lesson in humility. He sat down right then and there and took a small child. Cradling a child in his arms, Jesus tells them that they must welcome children. A child so small that it had to be held. A child so small that it really couldn't offer them anything of value. A child so small that it demanded more attention and care than anyone else in that room. But Jesus goes further. Not only are the disciples supposed to welcome and care for children, but in so doing, they are welcoming God. The lesson is this: God comes to us not in the powerful and the mighty. God comes to us in the small and the weak. God doesn't come handing out goodies, but comes to us with open and needy hands. This week, we're going to spend some time together looking at lessons from the road. Each day at the end of our time together, I'll give you a reflection question. Feel free to talk about this question with the people in your life. Maybe while you're taking a walk or driving down the road or around the dinner table. If you live alone, maybe you'll want to call up a friend to talk about these questions or spend some time journaling. Today's question is this: how can you be more open to welcoming God in your own life? How can you be more open to welcoming God in your own life? Now, get moving. The road is open and God is waiting to show up. Remember that faith is a journey. I'll see you tomorrow.